In music, one doesn't make the end of a composition the point of the composition. If that were so, the best conductors would be those who played fastest. And there would be composers who wrote only finales. People go to a concert just to hear one crashing chord, because that's the end. But we don't see that as something brought by our education into our everyday conduct. We've got a system of schooling which gives a completely different impression. It's all graded. And what we do is we put the child into the corridor of this grade system with a kind of, come on, kitty, kitty, kitty. And yeah, you go to kindergarten, you know. And that's a great thing, because when you finish that, you'll get into first grade. And then, come on, first grade leads to second grade, and so on. And then you get out of grade school, you've got high school, and it's revving up. The thing is coming. Then you're going to go to college. And by Jove, then you get into graduate school. And when you're through with graduate school, you go out to join the world. And then you get into some racket where you're selling insurance. And they've got that quota to make. And you're going to make that. And all the time, this thing is coming. It's coming. It's coming. That great thing, the success you're working for. Then when you wake up one day about 40 years old, you say, my God, I've arrived. I'm there. And you don't feel very different from what you always felt. And there's a slight letdown because you feel there's a hoax. And there was a hoax. A dreadful hoax. They made you miss everything. We thought of life by analogy with a journey, with a pilgrimage, which had a serious purpose at the end, and the thing was to get to that end, success or whatever it is, or maybe heaven after you're dead. But we missed the point the whole way along. It was a musical thing, and you were supposed to sing or to dance while the music was being played.
We have a system of education that is modelled on the interests of industrialism and in the image of it. I'll give you a couple of examples. Schools are still pretty much organised on factory lines, so ringing bells, separate facilities, specialised into separate subjects. We still educate children by batches. You know, we put them through the system by age group. Why do we do that? You know, why is there this assumption that the most important thing kids have in common is how old they are? You know, it's like the most important thing about them is their date of manufacture. You know what I mean? Well, I know kids who are much better than other kids at the same age in different disciplines, you know, or at different times of the day, or better in smaller groups than in large groups, or sometimes they want to be on their own. If you're interested in the model of learning, you don't start from this production line mentality. It's essentially about conformity, and increasingly it's about that as you look at the growth of standardized testing and standardized curricula. There was a great study done recently of divergent thinking. Published a couple of years ago. Divergent thinking isn't the same thing as creativity. I define creativity as the process of having original ideas that have value. Divergent thinking isn't a synonym, but it's an essential capacity for creativity. It's the ability to see lots of possible answers to a question, lots of possible ways of interpreting a question, to think what Edward de Bono would probably call laterally, to think not just in linear or convergent ways, to see multiple answers, not one. We all have this capacity. It mostly deteriorates. Now, a lot of things have happened to these kids as they've grown up. A lot. But one of the most important things that happened to them, I'm convinced, is that by now they've become educated. You know, they've spent 10 years at school being told there's one answer, it's at the back. And don't look. And don't copy, because that's cheating. I mean, outside schools, that's called collaboration. You know, but inside schools. Now, this isn't because teachers want it this way. It's just because it happens that way. It's because it's in the gene pool of education.
The mainstream method of education currently requires an all-knowing authority figure fulfilling the role of teacher and relaying empirical information to the students, after which said teacher will then review and grade the work of the students. This traditional approach to learning has been widely criticised throughout recent years as it relies on rote memorisation, teaching students what to think as opposed to how to think. And using the grading system has also been shown to create structural classism. Sugita Mitra is a professor of educational technology at the University of Newcastle. His first experiments in child learning began in 1999 with the Hole in the Wall project. Initially, a computer was placed in a kiosk built within a wall in a slum in New Delhi, and children were allowed to use this computer freely. The experiment aimed to show that kids could be taught by computers very easily without any formal training and independent of adult supervision. Mitra termed this approach minimally invasive education. The experiment grew and was repeated in many places. Currently, there are more than 23 hole-in-the-wall kiosks in rural India, and in 2004 it was extended to Cambodia. The results have now demonstrated that groups of children, irrespective of who they are or where they are, can learn to use computers and the internet on their own, using public computers in open spaces such as streets and playgrounds, even without initially knowing any English.
I wanted to test the limits of this system. The first experiment I did out of Newcastle was actually done in India, and I set myself an impossible target. Can Tamil-speaking 12-year-old children in a South Indian village teach themselves biotechnology in English on their own? And I thought, I'll test them, they'll get a 0. I'll give them material, I'll come back and test them, they'll get another 0. I'll go back and say, yes, we need teachers for certain things. I called in 26 children, they all came in there, I told them, look, there's some really difficult stuff on this computer. I wouldn't be surprised if you didn't understand anything. It's all in English, and I'm going. I came back after 2 months, and the 26 children marched in looking very, very quiet. I said, well, did you look at any of the stuff? They said, yes, we did. Did you understand anything? No, nothing. So I said, well, how long did you practice on it before you decided that you understood nothing? They said, we look at it every day. So I said, for 2 months you were looking at stuff you didn't understand. So a 12-year-old girl raises her hand and says, apart from the fact that improper replication of the DNA molecule causes genetic disease, we've understood nothing else. So their scores had gone up from 0 to 30%, which is an educational impossibility under the circumstances. But 30% is not a pass. So I found that they had a friend, a local accountant, a young girl, and they played football with her. I asked that girl, would you teach them enough biotechnology to pass? And she said, how would I do that? I don't know the subject. I said, no, use the method of the grandmother. She said, what's that? I said, well, what you've got to do is stand behind them and admire them all the time. Just say to them, that's cool, that's fantastic, what is that? Can you do that again? Can you show me some more? She did that for 2 months. The scores went up to 50, which is what the posh schools of New Delhi with a trained biotechnology teacher were getting. So I came back to Newcastle with these results and decided that there was something happening here that definitely was getting very serious. Across the River Tyne, 5,000 miles from Delhi, is the little town of Gateshead. In Gateshead, I took 32 children, and I started to fine-tune a method. I made them into groups of 4. I said, you make your own groups of 4. Each group of 4 can use 1 computer and not 4 computers. You can exchange groups, you can walk across to another group if you don't like your group, etc. You can go to another group, peer over their shoulders, see what they're doing, come back to your own group and claim it as your own work. The children enthusiastically got after me to say, now what do you want us to do? I gave them 6 GCSE questions. The first group, the best one, solved everything in 20 minutes. The worst, in 45. They used everything that they knew. News groups, Google, Wikipedia, Ask Jeeves, etc. The teacher said, is this deep learning? I said, well, let's try it. I'll come back after 2 months. We'll give them a paper test, no computers, no talking to each other, etc. The average score when I'd done it with the computers and the groups was 76%. When I did the experiment, when I did the test after 2 months, the score was 76%. There was photographic recall inside the children, I suspect because they're discussing with each other. A single child in front of a single computer will not do that. I have further results which are almost unbelievable of scores which go up with time. Because their teachers say that after the session is over, the children continue to Google further. Here in Britain, I put out a call for British grandmothers after my Kuppam experiment. The deal was that they would give me 1 hour of broadband time sitting at their homes 1 day in a week. So they did that, and over the last 2 years, over 600 hours of instruction has happened over Skype using what my students call the granny cloud.
Power of the Supreme.
Paget Gates said, a 10-year-old girl gets into the heart of Hinduism in 15 minutes. You know, stuff which I don't know anything about. 2 children watch a TED Talk. They wanted to be footballers before. After watching 8 TED Talks, he wants to become Leonardo da Vinci. It's pretty simple stuff. This is what I'm building now. They're called souls, self-organized learning environments. The furniture is designed so that children can sit in front of big, powerful screens, big broadband connections, but in groups. If they want, they can call the granny cloud. This is the soul in Newcastle. The mediator is from Pune, India. So how far can we go? I think we've just stumbled across a self-organizing system. A self-organizing system is one where a structure appears without explicit intervention from the outside. Self-organizing systems also always show emergence, which is that the system starts to do things which it was never designed for, which is why you react the way you do, because it looks impossible. I think I can make a guess now. Education is a self-organizing system where learning is an emergent phenomenon.
So, children left to their own devices are capable of self-learning, perhaps limited only by their ability to search for information. But what if this process was made easier? What if there was a website which consolidated a vast range of subjects, with short educational explanatory videos detailing almost every aspect of mathematics, history, healthcare, medicine, finance, physics, chemistry, biology, astronomy, economics, cosmology, civics, and computer science? Well, that website exists. It's called Khan Academy. Developed by Salman Khan in 2006, the site currently has more than 4,000 micro-lectures and has delivered over 240 million lessons worldwide. In fact, the Khan Academy has been so successful, it is likely the primary inspiration behind Academic Earth, which has evolved the concept to include actual lectures from more than 40 top US colleges, including Harvard, MIT, Princeton, Stanford, and Yale. Since Academic Earth, a group of educators from Stanford University have formed Coursera, adopting the same principles as Khan and Academic Earth. However, with Coursera, upon the completion of online courses, students are awarded certificates, which can and indeed have been used to gain employment, and in some cases as a substitute for credit in real-world educational institutions.
Every few seconds, the ticker on the Coursera website moves up, as 70,000 new students a week enroll in courses like Human-Computer Interaction, Introduction to Astronomy, and Modern Poetry, all offered by top-tier universities.
I've been teaching a class similar to this at Duke for 10 years, and I'm excited about the opportunity to offer it to many more students through this online venue.
Welcome to the brave new world of massive open online courses, known as MOOCs, a tool for democratizing higher education.
Migration have created that rupture. Of course, it was a very significant.
So welcome to the Artificial Intelligence class on Udacity.
The MOOC is usually free, creditless, and massive. MOOCs first landed in the spotlight last year when Sebastian Thrun, a Stanford professor, offered a free artificial intelligence course, attracting 160,000 students in 190 nations. Although only a fraction of students who sign up actually complete the courses, millions of students are now enrolled in hundreds of online courses, including those offered by Udacity, Mr. Thrun's spin-off company, edX, a joint venture between Harvard and MIT, and Coursera, a Stanford spin-off that has attracted top universities like Princeton, Columbia, Duke, and University of Pennsylvania.
We're in the business of creating and disseminating knowledge. And in 2012, the internet is an incredibly important place to be present if you're in the knowledge dissemination business.
One of the first MOOCs the university developed is called Healthcare Policy and the Affordable Care Act, taught by Dr. Ezekiel J. Emanuel, a former health advisor to the White House Office of Management and Budget.
There's nothing like watching yourself on video to realize how boring and stilted you can be.
So far, most MOOCs are in tech subjects like computer science and math, with straightforward content that could be graded by a computer. Providing instructor connection and feedback in courses like Dr. Emanuel's is tricky.
The student who's not in the class can't ask me a question directly in real time, and we can't go off on some path that might be very important to understanding certain subtleties or complexities of the course.
It's funny that people get really worked up about the grade. People want to feel like, they're being acknowledged for the amount of effort they're putting in.
So instead of a whiteboard, they can handwrite on a tablet.
When Anand Agarwal, a professor of computer science and engineering at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, decided in 2011 to offer his Circuits and Electronic course online for free, he was amazed by the response.
I had over 150,000 students taking it from 162 countries.
And while the vast majority of students eventually dropped out, the sheer number of students who passed the course was remarkable.
Of the 155,000 students that took the course, about 5% passed the course and earned a certificate. So that was about 7,200. That is a big number. If I were to teach on campus twice a year, both in the spring and fall semesters, I would have to teach for about 40 years before I could teach 7,200 students.
Now, just 3 years later, Agarwal's overall online venture reaches 2.5 million students from every country in the world.
Congratulations, everybody.
With help from Harvard and MIT, the computer science professor founded edX, a nonprofit learning destination with a staff of more than 100.
Learners from all over the world can come in and take these great courses for free. And these are courses from great universities like Berkeley from California, or Harvard and MIT, or Tsinghua from China, or IIT Bombay, or Australian National University.
So you're cutting between the different cameras.
Massive open online courses, nicknamed MOOCs, initially generated huge expectations. Many hoped they would make higher education more affordable and accessible to students around the globe.
Imagine taking a class with 100,000 or more students.
But the format has met with criticism from some professors who say computers cannot equal the quality of in-person teaching.
We want to know what you think.
Sam Sharma is an assistant professor of writing at Stony Brook University in New York.
In our discipline, the objective of students' learning is not to basically learn the content of the discipline, but instead to use the content as a context, to engage in intellectual discussions, to develop their positions, intellectual positions, to debate and argue and develop critical thinking skills. And that oftentimes requires the expertise and guidance and mentoring and close connection, one-on-one support to the students.
One of the concerns that the existing academia has about quality is delivering information equal to educating someone?
So educating someone doesn't mean just consume a set of information. It's not about just watching a video and just listening to it. We have interactivity. We have problem sets and exercises that students engage with. They get feedback. And so they get to try things out and experiment with things.
Earlier this summer, the Campaign for the Future of Higher Education, a group funded in part by teachers' unions, created this video highly critical of MOOCs.
So far, MOOCs equal failure.
Professor Lillian Tays is the president of the California Faculty Association.
I think every single faculty member in our system worries all the time that these products come into our system making all kinds of claims. They're going to be cheaper, they're going to be quicker, they're going to move people in and out faster. But nowhere in the conversation is there a discussion about the quality of the education that they are helping us provide for our students.
I really believe that we can transform education, both in quality and scale and access.
Despite all his online teaching success, Agarwal agrees with critics who say online courses are no replacement for classroom instruction. He says edX can be an effective supplement.
Does anyone know an example of machine learning?
Agarwal points to universities that use the edX platform on campus, an approach called blended learning.
It doesn't replace the campus. We really believe that ultimately the right model for learning is a blended model, where you blend the best of online and the best of in-person. Students watch the videos and do a lot of interactive exercises online. And then they work in groups with the professor, and the professor will answer questions and help the students and really help them learn the material. And so this is a form of blending, where you're blending the online with the in-person to very good results.
There are different interpretations.
Professor Brian White agrees. White, who has taught biology at the University of Massachusetts in Boston for 15 years, decided last fall to replace his lectures with edX instruction.
I didn't give a single lecture on any of this material. All these sort of lectures that were sacred to me, that I'd set up for all these years, were not necessary.
In 700X, you'll be guided through the basics of biology.
Instead, White used edX's Intro to Biology class with lectures by MIT professor Eric Landers, a world-renowned scientist and leader of the Human Genome Project. White says online lectures made it easy for his students to learn the material.
They really like the ability to stop and rewind and watch at their own pace, to do the equivalent of saying, can you say that again? Can you say that again? Can you say that again? Can you skip over that boring part?
That allowed White to focus his time in class getting students to truly understand the lesson. He added his own materials and spliced edX content to best fit his course.
I used the MOOCs lectures to show the students what they needed to do to come to class prepared. And then in class, rather than just telling them the information, what I was able to do is take them the next step. So show them how to use it, fill in any cracks, deal with students' individual issues. To the extent that I can be replaced by a videotape, fine, replace that part of me with a videotape and leave me to do what I do best, which is to work with students.
Refocus some of the paragraphs in the body of the essay. Right?
Unlike White, many faculty are uncomfortable with the idea of handing over lectures to another professor and see it as a way college administrators could cut costs in the future by reducing the number of professors on campus.
We have to think differently about human capacity. We have to recognize that most great learning happens in groups, that collaboration is the stuff of growth. If we atomize people and separate them and judge them separately, we form a kind of disjunction between them and their natural learning environment.
Professors, institutions, and online course designers all agree that online learning is likely to play an important role in the future of higher education.
Okay, can we get started? I'm here in Berkeley College, one of the 12 residential colleges here at Yale, with some of my students from my class. This course derives from an earlier course that I had in 2011 on what we called Open Yale.
Welcome to Roman Architecture. I'm Professor Kleiner. As one walks through this very traditional porch, through the original bronze doors, into the interior, one is struck by the extraordinary nature of the interior of the Pantheon.
My name is Akil Reed Amar. I'll be the instructor for the course. In other words, we are all textualists, and we are all, in a sense, living constitutionalists as well. We are both. At the end, we see the great themes. We see the idea of geostrategy, join or die. America, these colonies border on each other. They actually have to work together.
I'd like to welcome everybody to the first week of Moralities of Everyday Life. Here's an example of imitation. A soccer player has just missed a big kick, and he puts his hand on both sides of his head. But now look at the people around him. We imitate each other all the time.
Do you think they were being exploited, the performing dolphins? People pay money to go see them perform.
It's not an uncommon form of exploitation. It's totally accepted.
Okay, is it different than the exploitation of humans in a factory?
Depends on the condition.
Yeah.
So it's messy, right? It's not obvious.
Here we learn
learn about other string techniques in addition to vibrato, namely pizzicato and tremolo.
What I want to do is teach you a principled approach to negotiation to allow you to make great logical arguments that will persuade the other side to come to a better agreement, certainly for you, and perhaps even for both of you.
I think the ideal future of higher education would definitely be something that's more accessible.
To collaborate in a way where the product is ultimately stronger for it.
I would like my education to be more customizable.
Be able to learn on a global scale. Intimate relationships with professional personal mentors.
Enhance your experience in the classroom and bring you outside of the classroom as well.
Students need to get more exposure to practical, tangible skill sets.
It always needs to have that balance of the human interaction.
There's a lot of room for improvement.
Far too often we're siloed in our individual schools.
I came here to think more about my future and where I can have more impact in my life.
Given another year, another 2 years, I think this is all going to completely change.
The capability is there and that we just need to do something about it. I see the role of technology as the accelerator, the expander, the multiplier.
Technology is making it much easier to communicate globally and to do business globally.
And I see it eliminating a lot of time from what students spend currently in classrooms. So I see it freeing up more time for students, and I see it becoming more of a learn at your own pace kind of experience.
I see technology as a real way to reach down and get people who haven't necessarily been exposed to the type of school that I'm at.
A lot of it's happening right now. We have MOOCs, we also have online classes, we have things that are just starting, and I think this is the beginning of the life cycle of higher education.
There's still something to be said about the in-class experience because you get to immediately engage with students and respond to each other's thoughts.
You would really have to find the right mix of what should be digital and what should be in a classroom and what should be in a group setting, because I think there's a lot to be said about what you can get from a traditional education experience.
But I know it's already started, and I have faith that there's going to be some great technologies that's really going to take us into the future and really going to make it easy.
Human resources are like natural resources. They're often buried deep. You have to go looking for them. They're not just lying around on the surface. You have to create the circumstances where they show themselves. And you might imagine education would be the way that happens, but too often it's not. Every education system in the world is being reformed at the moment, and it's not enough. Reform is no use anymore, because that's simply improving a broken model. What we need, and the word's been used many times during the course of the past few days, is not evolution, but a revolution in education. Innovation is hard, because it means doing something that people don't find very easy for the most part. It means challenging what we take for granted, things that we think are obvious. The great problem for reform or transformation is the tyranny of common sense. Things that people think, well, they can't be done any other way because that's the way it's done. I came across a great quote recently from Abraham Lincoln. He said this in December 1862 to the second annual meeting of Congress. I ought to explain that I have no idea what was happening at the time. We don't teach American history in Britain. We suppress it. You know, this is our policy, so... So no doubt something fascinating was happening in December 1862, which the Americans among us will be aware of. But he said this: the dogmas of the quiet past are inadequate to the stormy present. The occasion is piled high with difficulty, and we must rise with the occasion. As our case is new, so we must think anew and act anew. We must disenthrall ourselves, and then we shall save our country.